What is going on, guys? It is James here with someone that at one point we used to be in the same city. We used to go to the same school. She was not a friend of mine growing up, but we did happen to cross paths because her sister was a friend of mine when I was growing up. Today we have on the podcast Danielle Lewis, registered dietitian, licensed dietitian, master of science in nutrition, and we're here to talk about all things nutrition, weight loss, general health, and then also kind of go into some GI health stuff. So, Danielle, I greatly appreciate you coming on the podcast today.
Yeah, thanks for having me, James.
Cool. I kind of just want to jump right into it. But could we just start with how'd you get here? How'd you get to be, an MS, RD, LD, right, and any other acronyms that are to come after that? And how'd we get here?
Yeah. I mean, so I went to undergrad initially pre-dental. My dad's a dentist, as I'm sure you probably remember. So I was initially pre-dental as well, and realized halfway through, this is not for me. This is not it. So I took a nutrition class. I'd always been interested in nutrition for my personal health and well-being. So took a class and realized that hey, I can actually make this my job and, help other people. So I transferred from Mercer to UGA because I changed my major to dietetics. And then once I changed my major, graduated from UGA, you have to do a combined internship. So a master's degree and internship I did at Georgia State. And then I graduated from that, started working in a hospital setting, and then created my own private practice, and kind of now here we are. So it's been a long journey, but definitely been worth it.
Cool. I mean, a lot of people come out of school, right? And a lot of people in medicine that I know, they don't go into private practice for 10 years, right? They go work in a big hospital group, do whatever there. I mean, what kind of led to you going from public to private so quickly?
Yeah. So I enjoyed the hospital setting. It was a really great place for me to learn. And you see a lot of different things, and it's really fast paced. So I was in an inpatient setting. So actually working in a hospital. And then I wanted to specialize a little bit more. So that was kind of, in the hospital, you see a little bit of everything. So I wanted to specialize a little bit more. I really enjoyed the GI world, so gastrointestinal world, which I saw a lot of in the hospital. So I wanted to kind of specialize in that. So I worked in an outpatient clinic. And then, with that, there were still kind of some walls around what you could and couldn't do, right? Because you weren't necessarily the one in charge. So I started doing, seeing some clients on the side. And then, once I had my daughter in May, I decided to kind of take the jump and just kind of go full time in my own private practice instead of double dipping with, the clinic and my practice.
Yeah. I mean, what have you found to be the most difficult thing for you jumping over to that private practice?
Yes, that's a good question. I mean, honestly, I think it was an adjustment to where when you're in a clinic, the patients just they just come to you, right? Whereas when you're in a private practice, you have to do more so the business side of things, which that's not something that you're taught in undergrad. You're not taught that as a dietitian, how to run a business. So I think that was probably the biggest learning curve for me. But once, there are a lot of dietitians who, do what I do and own private practices. And there's plenty of resources out there for, to kind of learn how to do that. So you can learn from other people's mistakes and try to, make it your own. So that was kind of, I think, the biggest learning curve, but having other mentors out there is really what helped me.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And I mean, a beautiful thing, a daughter, right? Probably a little bit harder to be a mom and working full time, right? If you're not working for yourself. Is that fair?
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah. A mom in itself is a full-time job. So, being a mom and then working in a clinic and working in my private practice, I mean, there was, not enough hours in the day. So, that's why, it's nice to kind of be able to make my own schedule and work around her schedule as well.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. If you're cool with it, I'd like to back up just to general nutrition, and then we'll kind of parse into, where your specialty is at. I want your opinion on this. As far as nutrition's concerned, you can look at someone like V-Shred, right? Who says it's detox teas and it's intermittent fasting and nothing else works. You can look at people that are keto. You can look at the religious sects SECTS that also are like, no, intermittent fasting got to work. Then you have people that are like, yo, carbs are bad. Yo, fat is bad. Yo, dairy's bad. Hey, I've got acne, so I'm going to cut out everything, but I'm going to be vegan. I want to save the world. Like, can you just, I mean, for the average person, can you cut through all of that noise for us and just give us like a sound recommendation, not for specificity for certain goals, but just general nutrition? Like, what should people look for and what should people run away from? Because it is so daggum difficult to figure out who's telling the truth and who's lying and who's full of crap and who's not.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you hit the nail on the head. Nutrition's tough because there's so much information on the internet and so many blogs and so many people who have done one thing that works for them. So now, everyone thinks that they should try it. And there's a lot of trendy things out there. So it's tough to kind of weed through all of that. What I like to do for myself and what I recommend to most of anyone really is that everything can work, everything can fit. So we don't have to, cut out major food groups. If you're hungry, eat. If you're not, don't, like intermittent fasting, right? If it's not in your window and you're not allowed to eat, but you're starving, we want to be able to listen to those hunger and fullness cues, right? So, eating when you're hungry, stopping when you're full is way easier said than done, because we know there's a psychological component around food too. But that's something that I definitely recommend. And then also just trying to make everything fit, right? If we say, hey, I can never eat this piece of cake ever again, next thing you know, the whole cake's gone. So trying to make everything work and make everything fit, I think is probably the most realistic approach for anyone.
Yeah. Do you think it's fair though for a time to be a little bit more restrictive to work on habit forming?
Sure. Yeah, definitely. Because we want to, it's still, I guess all of that to say, well, everything can fit. We still need to have a well-balanced diet with, fruits and vegetables, lean meats, proteins, healthy fats. So all of that has to fit in there as well. So yes, I think that, there's definitely a time and place for that too.
Do you think there's any, I mean, in your professional opinion, and we will soundbite this if there's a wild answer, but do you think that there's any food that people should be staying away from, or is there truly good and bad foods, or is that not how it's actually broken down?
So like good and bad, quote unquote, like kind of, putting those terms around it, I think it leads to more of like a psychological thing around food, right? To where people are, there's a lot of mental stuff that goes into eating and food. So I don't necessarily like to put food as like quote good and bad. I think that kind of falls back to the same thing as like, it can fit, but what's the portion size? How often is it happening? It's like, if you say, you can't have bacon for breakfast ever, that's not, then it's like deemed horrible when, maybe you can have a slice or two, once every couple of weeks, and it's not the end of the world. So I think that, everything can fit, kind of falls back into that same rule of thumb.
Yeah. On that everything can fit. I mean, what's the deal with intuitive eating? Right. That term gets thrown around by everyone.
Yeah.
All over the place.
It's kind of like that, right? Where it's like, that kind of goes back to the eating when you're hungry, stopping when you're full kind of thing, right? So kind of listening to what your body needs when you're hungry, give your body something that's like a well-balanced meal. So it kind of falls back to that, which, you hear the term intuitive eating, you're like, what is that? It's just more so like, listening, eating when you're hungry, stopping when you're full, giving your body well-balanced, nutrient-dense foods. That's kind of what we're looking for.
Do you ever have clients that hit you with, I'm just big boned?
I have heard that, but not it's like most of my clients are GI related. So, I don't hear that a lot anymore. I think I used to back in the day, like when I was more kind of seeing a little bit of everything, but yeah, I don't know if that's still a thing or not.
Well, I only ask because in the personal training world, people love like new clients or potential clients love to say, I've been always like this. This is genetic. Like the visceral fat that I have is genetic. Like, I mean, where's the validity in something like that from a nutritional standpoint? Like, are people predisposed to carrying that much more visceral fat, or is that straight up just not a thing?
Yeah. So, I mean, our genetics play a role in a lot of things, right? Like your It can play a role in your cholesterol level. It can play a role in other conditions like diabetes or pre-diabetes, heart conditions, that kind of stuff. So there could be, some genetic component to it. The other, side of it is that, if you grew up eating, lots of fast food and not eating at home a lot and eating a lot of sweets, then that could also be why you're kind of predisposed to it. Right. So, there's two sides to the story there. So just trying to figure out what's actually accurate per, you as an individual.
Yeah, no, I totally get that. And you said that you made the transition. Can you go into a little bit more of how you made the transition into specializing in GI, like away from your general weight loss? When I think registered dietitian, I think, hey, these are the subject matter experts on nutrition in general. Obviously, I also don't think cardiologist when you say doctor, but it's a specialty, right? So can you talk a little bit more in depth of how you got into GI, why you care about it, why other people should care about it, and maybe what it looks like in the world, like how many people are actually dealing with these issues, whether they know it or not?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. Because GI is something that people don't talk about, right? It's kind of like, you don't talk about your bowel movements or, your GI symptoms. So it's something that a lot of people are actually dealing with, and they just don't talk about it because that's not something that you bring up at, the dinner table. Right. So, it's more common than you think, but, I got into the GI world. I was seeing some GI patients in the hospital, and I just wanted to have more follow-up. I was seeing them and then they would go home and I never saw them again. So I wanted to have more follow-up, which is why I transferred into that outpatient setting. So you kind of were seeing your patients a little bit more frequently. And so you just have a little bit more connection with them. But really what I love about, GI nutrition is that a lot of the clients who I work with, they feel so bad and they're taking medicine and they're doing all these things. And it's putting, they're stressed and they're not sleeping well and they just feel bad all the time. But no one ever thought to tell them, hey, maybe we should look at your diet. And then we change things diet wise. We adjust their stress. We help manage stress. We focus on sleep. We focus on water intake. We focus on all these other things rather than just medicine, and they feel better. And that's, the cool thing one of the things I love the most about my job is helping people feel good and, helping people feel so much better, which is why I love what I do.
Yeah. Now, would you say if you had to percentage split it between preventative and then reactionary, like what you do, the things, and when you're talking about GI, is it mostly on the back end? Like, hey, we're dealing with a problem. Let's go ahead and diagnose it that way. Let's be a diagnostician there. Or are there things preventatively that you would recommend more people start doing if they think that they might have sensitivity, or they think, or people in their family have, or they're just like, hey, I just want to be a little bit healthier. Well, maybe we do these things.
Yeah. I will say most of the people that I work with, most of my clients, it is, I have pain, I have loose stools, I'm bloated, help. And so I'll work with them to kind of adjust their diet, figure out what their intolerances are, to where they no longer have pain. They're no longer having loose stools 4 times a day. So we work together to figure that stuff out. I will say that is, 90% of the clients who I work with, that's majority of what we're doing. It's kind of like, they feel bad, let's fix it. However, to kind of try to get ahead of that, a Mediterranean diet is kind of like the general healthy diet, quote unquote, that I would recommend. It kind of goes back again, I keep saying this, but like how everything can fit, right? It has fruits, it has vegetables, it has lean meats, it has proteins, it has healthy fats. So that is something that I recommend. The other thing that I recommend, especially from a GI standpoint, is trying to avoid processed things. So if you look at an ingredients list and it has like 45 ingredients, you can't pronounce half the things on it, that's probably not your best option. So if you can't even pronounce it, you probably can't digest it. It's kind of like a good rule of thumb. So that's the other thing that I recommend from a food standpoint. And then there's other factors that play a role in GI health too, because our brain and our gut is the strongest connection that your body makes. So they're constantly chatting back and forth all day long. So if you're doing everything right in your diet, but your stress is like a 10 out of 10, that could be triggering GI symptoms that can be affecting your body. So focusing on stress management, sleep, water intake, that kind of stuff's important too.
Oh, wow. Interesting. So lowering cortisol and really focusing on recovery.
Yes, definitely.
and
Definitely.
not just doing what James does and run on caffeine, like
Yeah, it's
800
probably not your
milligrams a
best
day,
option. Not your best option.
just running.
Mhm.
Um, I don't want to go graphic, but can you kind of when you're talking about loose stool, when you're talking about the common things that come up, I mean, are those things that have crossover to other things, autoimmune, or can develop into other things, or are they kind of just pretty isolated to the things that you mentioned that really impact GI health?
Yeah, so usually a lot of these symptoms that people are having are related to some other GI diagnosis. So, for example, I work with a lot of patients who have irritable bowel syndrome. So their loose stools
Is
are
that
related
IBS?
to their IBS. Yes. Yep. So their loose stools, their pain, their bloating is related to the IBS, which is a lot of times related to their diet.
What is I
Auto-
what is IBS? Like what?
yeah. So IBS is actually a diagnosis of exclusion. So basically that means that they go to their doctor, their GI doctor. They say, hey, I have all these symptoms. They do a full workup. They do a colonoscopy, endoscopy, all these labs, and everything comes back normal. So then they kind of say, okay, you have irritable bowel syndrome, which is when they come to me because they're like, what am I supposed to do? And we figure out, let's figure out some dietary triggers and other stuff that could potentially be impacting you.
Okay,
Mm-hmm.
interesting. Okay, so Mediterranean, is that DASH?
Similar. So DASH, yes, very similar. DASH focuses a little bit more on the sodium intake because it's focused more on high blood pressure, but Mediterranean is still a heart healthy approach. It's just Mediterranean has a little bit more like healthy fat focus.
Yeah. What can you define a healthy fat for everyone listening?
Sure, yeah. So there's two types of fat. There's saturated fat and then there's unsaturated fat. So saturated fat comes from animal products. So that would be things like beef, pork, bacon, any kind of dairy product is going to have saturated fat. And then unsaturated fat, that's going to be from plant-based products. So think like avocado, olive oil, nuts and seeds. Those are going to be your healthy fats. So if you were to leave, when you make bacon and you pour the grease in the jar and you sit it on the counter, it gets hard. But if you were to leave olive oil on the counter, same amount of time, that's never hardening, right? So think about that's kind of what it does in our arteries too. So the saturated fat is going to get hard like that, whereas the unsaturated fat is not. So that's why we want to choose those unsaturated, healthier fats.
That's a that's a pretty interesting picture there. That's what it does in
Yeah,
our
you like
artery.
that graphic for you?
Hard pass. I eat dark meat all the time. So yeah, let's rewind that one. Um as far as GI health, I mean, what outside of diet, right? Is there other things that we should be doing? Like our sleep, like our hydration, like exercise to stay away from. I mean, is there any way that diastasis recti can then impact your GI health? Like, can you talk to me about those kind of things?
Yeah. So things that you can do at home to kind of help with GI is, meditation is really helpful for a lot of people. It's good from like a mental health standpoint. It helps with your sleep. So meditation is something that I recommend for a lot of my clients. Other things that I recommend are just simple breathing exercises. So it's more common than not for stress level to be 10 out of 10 or 8 out of 10, pretty high, right? Mm-hmm. So just some like breathing exercises. You can do them anywhere. It's one of the most effective ways to manage stress, just kind of like inhaling, exhaling, breathing exercises. So that's something that I recommend for a lot of people as well. And, it doesn't take a lot of time. Whereas, if you're like, okay, I have to do meditation or I have to do yoga, it's, that's going to take 30 minutes out of your day. Whereas breathing exercises will take 4 minutes, so that's something that I do recommend for a lot of people.
Yeah. Is there a specific type of breathing, like box breathing? Is that what you would recommend or something else?
Yeah, that could be helpful. Yeah, just kind of like think about if you've ever taken a yoga class before, how they focus a lot on your breath. That can be helpful too.
Okay. So managing stress, getting more sleep.
Mm-hmm.
So all of the things that we've been told since we were children that we should be doing, that we don't, and we still don't do as adults. And I'm sure some of us with kids don't do them either a lot of times.
Because you're trying to do a million things at one time, right? So I think that's kind of another thing that people with food too, we're trying to eat in the car. We're eating our lunch in 5 minutes flat because we're rushing to another meeting. We're eating while doing emails. So that kind of stuff, we just don't chew our food very well, which means that chewing is the first part of digestion. And a lot of times we just rush through it by eating our whole entire lunch in 5 minutes flat. So something else to know is just kind of like slow down. Again, easier said than done, but can definitely be helpful.
How much are we supposed to be chewing?
They say like 20 something times, right? So
per bite of something?
Per bite. However, I don't think that's very realistic, honestly. I think it's like, you're if essentially getting into mush. I typically just tell people, put your fork down in between bites, like eat something, put your fork down, swallow it, as opposed to just constantly like shoveling food in. I think that's a little bit more of a realistic approach.
Okay. Yeah, I need to work on that then. Cause, I eat with a spoon, not a fork, and, we just keep moving.
Yeah.
So that makes sense. Yeah. With, can we talk about artificial dyes and cereal and sugar? And I'm curious your thoughts on the ridiculous volume that we consume artificial dyes and the ridiculous volume we consume all kinds of processed candies, sugars, sweets, and what have you, Reese's Cups to Captain Crunch to whatever. I mean, even as grown ass adults in our 20s and 30s, people are still eating this stuff like they're children, right? What is that doing to our health?
So the artificial stuff, that kind of goes back to like that label reading, right? If you look at something and you're like, I don't even know what that is, or I can't even pronounce that. I have no idea what that is. Why are we putting that in our body, right? That's not, if we can't even know if it's, some lab made thing that we don't even know what it is, that's probably not the best thing for us. So it's definitely, I guess, from the flip side, it is approved by the FDA, right? So it is approved. However, is it the healthiest option? In my opinion, no. Not your best option. Choosing more of your whole foods is going to be your best choice. If I know it's not realistic to never eat something that comes from a package, right? But if you look at the ingredients list, what's in it. There's like, a short and sweet list. Okay, that's fine. But when we get to these weird additives and colors and lots of sugars and stuff, that's probably not your best choice.
So if you're saying that things that have like wild ingredient lists aren't your best choices, would you say that you still drink Starbucks?
So I personally, so we got an espresso recently. And so now we're just like, coffee addicts at home, which, Starbucks, they have like lots of sugars and flavors and other stuff in them too. But if you're going to go there and just get like a coffee or a tea or, something, okay. But when you get lots of these fancy schmancy drinks, they have lots of sugar in them, your pumpkin spice lattes and all that kind of stuff. But again, it can fit, if we're having one pumpkin spice latte per season, okay, fine. But if you're having one a day, probably not the best option.
Love how you bring it back. It could all fit, James. It could all fit.
It can.
Do you think that the average person should be counting their calories?
I think that it depends on the person, because sometimes counting your calories is helpful, right? Like sometimes people look at it and they're like, oh, I didn't realize that when I constantly walk by the pantry and randomly grab a handful of, nuts or whatever, it all adds up. And, sometimes it's helpful for people to see that. I don't think it's realistic to count your calories every day of your life for the rest of your life though. So I think it's a good tool to help you learn what portion sizes look like, how many calories are in your meal. Maybe it helps you learn that, instead of putting, I don't know, like the heavy cream in something, you put the 2% milk, I think it's a good learning tool. Long story short, but so I don't think it's something that we should do forever and ever.
Yeah, no, I totally get that. I mean, it can be kind of neurotic for some. It can be great for others. I mean, it's kind of like a lot of things. I was just curious as a dietitian, like, I'm sure there's times where you're like, hey, we need to count this because we need to figure out what we're doing and out. But you're probably, if someone has a propensity to get super obsessed about it, you're probably not having them plug into MyFitnessPal, right? Like
Right.
day in, day out.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Okay. So a little bit of more of an amorphous question. How do we fix obesity in the United States?
I think it all kind of stems back to education. As you know, I think that's the kind of what it stems back to, and just from when kids are young too, right? Like,
Mhm.
if we grow up eating fast food for most of our meals and eating, sugary cereals and Starbucks every day, that's kind of what you're just trained to do that, right? Things like sugar it's addictive. There's lots of research studies out there that show that sugar itself can be as addictive as like certain drugs are. So if you're kind of growing up eating sugar, lots of added sugars, then you just kind of do that your whole life, pass it on to the next generation kind of thing. So I think it all stems from like education, and then also bringing that back into the household. There's obviously more complex than that. Otherwise we wouldn't have this issue, but I think can definitely be a good starting point.
Yeah. Do you find that people, when they come to you and they're at the point where well, first, let me break this down in two. One, do you find that the people that when they come to you, they're kind of at a place where they're kind of out of options in their mind? They don't know what to do. They kind of tried everything else.
I hear that a lot. And also, like we talked about earlier, there are a lot of diets to try, right? There's lots of, you could do keto, you could do intermittent fasting. So there's a lot of things to do. But the only thing that works is if it works long term, right? So if you do keto and it works, but then you gain all the weight back, it didn't actually work. So that's something that people will come to me and say, like, I did this and it worked, but then I gained the weight back, and it's like, well, then did it actually work? Not really, right? Because we're still in the same issue. So trying to find something they can sustain and maintain long term is the biggest thing.
Yeah, I love that you said that. I believe to my core that if you can't do what you're doing today for the rest of your life, then I mean, why really do it for a day? Like, if you're not going to go out and run a marathon every day, why are we trying to run a marathon every day for 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 weeks?
Yeah.
I don't know. That doesn't seem too smart to me, but
No.
Not me. Yeah. So, I mean, how about alcohol? What is alcohol's role in the GI world? Do you see a lot of adverse effects of alcohol in your patients?
So alcohol, it depends. So acid reflux, I work with some clients who have acid reflux issues, and alcohol can trigger that because alcohol is pretty acidic. It also can loosen the esophageal sphincter, which is so basically like your esophagus is like a tube. At the bottom of the tube, it connects to your stomach. It's supposed to stay, the sphincter is supposed to stay closed. With alcohol, it kind of like relaxes and gets loose. So that can cause reflux symptoms. So for my acid reflux or GERD clients, alcohol can definitely be a trigger. Other thing where alcohol can be a trigger is inflammatory bowel disease. So IBD patients, alcohol can sometimes be a trigger for them. The thing with GI and nutrition is that everyone is so different. So what's a trigger for me might not be a trigger for you, or, vice versa. So that's why working with a dietitian or working with someone to figure out what your individual triggers are is important.
Yeah. You mentioned, do you say inflammation? Do you see a lot of inflammation?
So in the GI world, yes, because inflammatory bowel diseases, that's kind of an autoimmune disorder that where your intestines kind of attack itself, so to speak, for lack of better terms. So yes, there's definitely inflammation there.
Yeah, I've never heard of GERD. I don't know what that is, and I've also never heard of you said IBD.
Yep. So IBD is inflammatory bowel disease. So things like Crohn's disease and ulcerative colitis, those two would fall into that IBD umbrella. And that is inflammation is what that is. It's, inflammatory bowel disease. So that's inflammation of the GI tract. So Crohn's is inflammation of the entire GI tract from the mouth all the way down to the rectum, whereas the ulcerative colitis is just localized to the colon. But it's still inflammation nonetheless. And then GERD is gastroesophageal reflux disease. So acid reflux, basically. And there's inflammation there as well.
That it's just called GERD.
Yeah.
Oh, I've never heard that in my life. I've always just heard acid reflux.
Yep.
Wow. is there a high prevalence of those? Like, do they also come together? Like, are they a unit, or do you usually only have one of those?
So some people who have IBD can have GERD or acid reflux. But it's not necessarily like a deemed, if you have one, you're going to have the other. I would say it's definitely more common to have GERD than it is to have IBD.
I want to pivot a little bit. I hear this a lot from personal training clients, like all the time. Women saying that they're bloated. Okay. Are women actually bloated, or is there something else going on?
So it could be related to their diet, right? So, sometimes there's food intolerances that can cause bloating. Other things from a female, it could be, GYN related. So like menstrual cycles can affect bloating. So that's something that they should look into with their physician or again, a dietitian. So yeah, it could definitely be diet induced.
Yeah, like bloating gets thrown around all the time. Like, oh, I want to lose this weight. I want to do this, and then I'm always bloated. Like, are there supplements that you would recommend for that kind of thing, or they just need to go see a professional and kind of diagnose from there?
Yeah, I would recommend working with someone because I think it's important to find what your individual triggers are, right? Because then at least, and that's the thing, if you say, okay, garlic causes bloating, for me, then at least So, you keep garlic out of your diet. If you go to an Italian restaurant and you eat garlic, you're probably going to be bloated. But at least there's like that knowledge and awareness.
Yeah. And on that note, with supplements, with these detoxes, with these appetite suppressants, like, what are your thoughts on this kind of stuff? And when these things are not backed by, like, the FDA doesn't, like, they're not, I don't know what the actual term is. You might know the phrase. Like, these have not been checked by the FDA or what have you.
Oh, yeah, they're not regulated.
Okay, so people are just throwing whatever they want on a label and running it.
Yeah, you and I can go make a supplement tomorrow and no one would care. So that's kind of the thing to just be mindful of when taking any kind of supplements. And I typically recommend even vitamins, those aren't regulated. So typically looking for something that's been third-party tested. So if we go and make a product and we say there's X, Y, and Z in there, someone else will come and look at it and test it and say, yes, this is actually what's in here. So there's some third party who has nothing to do with our product. They come and verify it. So that's kind of, if the biggest thing I would recommend when looking for any kind of vitamin or supplement.
Yeah, because you have these, you have this like burn in the morning, burn in the evening. You have the appetite suppressants, and then you have pre-workout with a ton of niacin in it and all kinds of other stuff. What, like, is there anything that can be done outside of the third-party testing? Like, do we just not take supplementation? Do we just not look at micros? Like, do we not care about it if we're not going to have something that's tested?
Yeah, I mean, so the third-party testing is the biggest thing if you are, dead set on doing some type of supplement. I typically don't really recommend them, honestly. But that's something, especially when it comes into the like fitness world, that's something that like a sports dietitian may have more, is more like equipped for that kind of thing than I am. But typically with my clients, I don't really recommend supplements.
No supplements at all.
Of course, but
no omegas, no nothing.
So, I mean, it's best to get it from your food, but
not wrong.
Yeah, you can take it in a supplement if you need to, but usually the people who are conscious enough to take it in a supplement usually get enough in their diet.
Yeah. Those who are not ignorant. It's actually pretty funny the amount of times that you really don't need a supplement. You don't need to buy, $40 bottle of capsules. If you know what you're doing there. That definitely makes sense. So where is Danielle Lewis going? Where is your practice going? Where do you see yourself 5 years? What kind of impact do you want to have? Are you going to stay in GI? Are you going to bring people in? Are you going to go holistic? Or like, where are you going?
Yeah. So I will stay in GI. I love the GI world. Like I mentioned earlier, I love helping people feel better through food and nutrition. So I will stay in the GI space. I think it's a really great fit for me, working with clients in, the GI world. So I'll definitely stay in this arena. My practice is 100% virtual, which was kind of a COVID thing, but I'm kind of loving. So I think it will stay virtual as well. It's nice for, my clients love it too, because they can be at work and, take a call on their lunch break. So it's not something that we have to be driving 20 minutes to see me. So I think we'll stay virtual. I'll stay in the GI space for sure. And then I do think that I'll bring on a team of dietitians in the future too, so that we could be seeing multiple people in, multiple locations and working with lots of clients and trying to help people continue to feel good through food and nutrition.
Yeah. I mean, with that, as you go and you bring on more people and you expand and you probably stay virtual for as long as you can swing it before you bring in and take on a bunch of overhead. I mean, what other changes in the GI world, in the dietitian world, like is there an overwhelming amount of research that is coming out? Is there more things that are changing? Do you have to be really kind of on top of it day in, day out? Or is it like, hey, every quarter there's going to be the conclusion of a few more studies that we're going to need to look at to make sure that we're all good here? Like, what does that look like for continuing education and research done in the space?
Yeah, there's a ton of research always coming out in nutrition. So there's lots of things that are always, being developed and, push forward. So as dietitians, we have to have 75 continuing education hours every 5 years. And that's just to stay registered in the US. And then to stay licensed in your state, it just depends on where you're located. But in the state of Georgia, you have to have 50 hours every 2 years. So that's kind of can help you stay up to date with current research trends, that kind of stuff.
Yeah. And is that just completing like a certain amount of coursework and then testing in it? Is that what that looks like?
So they have like online courses you could do. They have certifications you can get. You can specialize in different types of, like in the GI world, there's something called a low FODMAP diet. And you can specialize in that. You can get different, continuing education hours that way. So there's a lot, there's little, webinars you can do. So there's lots of different, things that you can do to keep up to date with the most current research.
Okay. Is there a ton of research that's relevant to GI that's coming out all the time, or is that kind of quarterly or every 6 months or whatnot?
Yeah. So frequency of how often it comes out, I guess I don't know off the top of my head how frequent it is, but I know that there's always research being done. What I'm thinking of offhand is that low FODMAP diet. So Monash University is the university that kind of does all the research behind it. And I know they're constantly doing more research, updating the diet and updating the portion sizes of certain things. So I'm not sure how frequently the new stuff comes out, but I do know that it comes out, like it just came out recently. So yeah.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. How do you think that the like let's step back and look at health in general. Let's look at medicine in general. Like general medicine, and maybe I have not gone to practitioners that have someone integrated that does nutrition. But like a general practitioner in just family medicine, talking about like giving the wrong advice, right, with nutrition, the wrong advice with diet. Where do you think the responsibility lies in the medical community to integrate registered and licensed dietitians into general populace, right? So people have access to this information, because if everyone's, a WebMD and a Google scientist out here, you're not going to get very far.
Right. Yeah. And I know we've all been guilty of Googling our symptoms before, right? So definitely been there, done that kind of thing, but you find things that are crazy and scary. And so it is, best to kind of go to a actual licensed registered provider. Yeah. So I think that it's something that is becoming a little bit more, people are becoming more aware of, dietitians and working closely with dietitians. I think that physicians are, at least the group of physicians I personally worked with, they were, very supportive of it. So I think it's something that we just need to continue to educate people and, provide as most knowledge as we can to, our specialty and what we do and how we can help.
Yeah. Do you think that there's pushback from the personal training and gym world on registered dietitians?
I do. I think that, so sorry, but I do. I think that, sometimes people overstep a little bit, and, I work out myself, but I can't write you a workout plan. That's not what I do. So just, if a personal trainer, that's their thing, my thing's diet. So we can work together to do those things. Just because I work out doesn't mean I should tell you what to do. Just because you eat food doesn't mean you should tell, someone what to do. Right.
Yeah. Well, with that, I mean, how do you think we bridge the gap? And I ask you that because I'm curious from your direction, how that looks. I do know from this side, there is definitely trainers, there's definitely gyms, definitely training groups that push back on the dietitians for sure. It absolutely exists. And I know that if I can see that you can absolutely see it too, both directions probably. But I mean, how do we bridge that gap? How do we work more together? How does personal training and diet come together to be more holistic, to actually help people, right? Because we need movement, and we can't escape nutrition. You're going to have to eat and drink water, right? And we're going to have to move unless we want to be morbidly obese, right? So how do we work together better?
I think it's just important to, make those referrals, make those connections, and just continue to communicate, right? Because if, let's just say, you refer me a client and I'm working with them and you're adjusting their workout plan, but I don't know about it, so I'm not adjusting their diet, then, we're not working together. So I think communication is the biggest thing, and, kind of working and just, trusting your specialty while you trust mine, kind of just, respecting each other's area of expertise.
Yeah, no, totally get that. I know that psychiatry and psychology, they butt heads too, and they're both working on the brain. So that's even a closer match there. But what about things like performance or precision nutrition, like the level 1 there? Like, it's not necessarily meal planning, right? It's not necessarily diet coaching, right? Are you familiar with precision nutrition?
A little bit. Yeah, I am.
So like they have one, CrossFit has one. You can look at, ISSA, NASM, CSCS, I don't believe has one, but like all of these programs have a nutrition program. Can you give me your general thoughts about that? You don't have to single anyone out. I'm just curious because they all have certifications that maybe in part give a trainer the misguided confidence that, they're ready to roll in nutrition, maybe at the same level that you would service somebody, even though that's kind of ridiculous. But, you get a certification, you're like, okay, I'm good, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So, just think of it this way, right? So that's like however many hours, maybe it's like, let's just say, I don't know, maybe it's like what, 5-10 hour course that they do or something.
I would say it's max 20 to 40. Like that's what
Right.
the CPT is too. It's nothing
Right.
crazy.
So, as a dietitian, you have to do your entire undergrad, you have to major in dietetics. Then you do a 1,200 minimum hour of internship, which is, and then on top of that, doing, grad school courses as well. Then you sit for an RD exam, and then you do all this continuing education. So it's just, there's a lot that goes into it, a lot of education and a lot of real life experience. So I think that that's something that you just have to take into consideration.
So for somebody that's looking to better their health, you would recommend that they kind of go to the subject matter experts for the different pockets, the different pillars that you have there in health and wellness?
Yeah, I do. I think so.
Okay. Yeah. Anything about your practice that we haven't gone over? Anything you want potential clientele to know? You want people that maybe know people that would be great for you to know?
Yeah. So, I guess best way to find me would be Instagram, the Gastro-Dietitian. My website is dldietetics.com. So you can, go on there and find other, client testimonials and things about me and my practice and how we can work together. And so those are kind of like the best places to look. The Instagram, of course, has some free resources, and then my website, you can set up an inquiry and we can work together.
Okay. And do you take women, men, both?
I take both. Yep. So I work with both women and men.
Okay. Yeah. Well, if you have anything else, I'd love to open up the floor. If not, I greatly appreciate you coming on. I think we
Yeah.
kind of scattershot, kind of went into a few things, went into a few buckets. Hopefully, you were able to explain everything in the GI world. I am just not an expert there, so if we've missed anything, run it. The floor is absolutely yours. I don't know enough about all of the specifics there. So
No, I mean, I think the biggest thing is that if you are having GI issues and you're having symptoms of like, loose stools, pain, bloating, constipation, it. And, that's something that if you want to get help with and try to figure out what your triggers are and work through it with a dietitian, reach out, contact me, send me an email, reach out through my website, send me an Instagram message. I'm happy to get those and work with clients to figure out, how we can get you feeling good again.
cool. And from a client standpoint, nobody has to have like a doctor referral or anything like that. They can come just straight to you.
Yep, just straight to me and we can work on it together.
Okay. Well,
Mm-hmm.
cool. Well, we will tag you in all of this, and we'll put your website in the show notes. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you want that, it will be there. Again, thank you so much for coming.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I greatly appreciate you coming on. And that's going to be it for us today, guys. We will see you next week, Monday at 0900 hours. Savon should be back in a few weeks. He is out and about with the new baby that y'all are familiar with. So we will catch you next week. And if you want to find this in full length on video, it is now full length on Anchor and YouTube, and then it's audio everywhere else. So greatly appreciate y'all coming out. Thank you so much for listening. And Danielle, again, thank you for coming on. We greatly appreciate it. Y'all have a great rest of your day. We'll talk to you later. Peace.